guys, tonight we're taking the last elevator down to where the air smells like disinfectant and old secrets, and the hall lights hum as if they're trying to pray in fluorescent Morse code. Don't worry, it's just a quiet story about an empty ward that won't stay empty, and a set of rules that only make sense once something starts knocking from inside the vents. You probably won't survive this, but that's half the fun, right? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with the city and the local time, so this place knows where to look for you later. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sign your name where you're told, a sleepy scrawl that looks like it's already fading, and the badge printer dings like a cheap bell at a motel that used to be busy. Authorization, temporary, night shift only, sub-level access granted. And the clerk's face stays calm in the way faces do, when they've learned that calm is the last thing people remember before alarms. It's fine, you tell yourself, because rules are just boundaries that keep the dark on its side of the glass. The order set reads like a dare. No entry without full PPE. No removal of PPE outside designated rooms. No food, no drink, no contact. No exit without written discharge. You've seen rules try to hold back floods, and you've seen floods teach rules to kneel. The signature dries, and a purple card winks. It looks like a bruise that learned to smile. The elevator is an old mouth that likes to swallow between sentences. You tap B2, and the doors close with a sigh, like two nurses agreeing not to talk about what they saw. The panel button winks again, then goes dull, then glows steady, as if it had to make up its mind about you. You feel that fan hum you asked for earlier, except it's not a fan. It's the air system, moving the building's breath in slow loops, and you wish the loops were wider. Between floors, the car stiffens, weight shifts, cable groans above you like some metal god having a dream about falling and deciding not to. The intercom crackles when you don't touch it. You hear a scuff, a hush, a breath too close. When a voice answers, it's yours, but late by a blink. And that's how echo becomes omen. You try the trick that always works. Look at the numbers, count them down. Pretend each is a heartbeat, and none of them skip. The fan in your room back home never misses. You tell yourself. And the best stories start with stairs or lifts, with small boxes that don't mind kissing the dark. They say in 1915, at the Paris catacombs, a camera was found with footage of a man wandering deeper, turning corners until he couldn't find his way back. Historians still debate whether the film was a staged hoax or a real descent into that honeycomb of bone and echo. But the idea is useful. Sometimes down keeps its promises better than up. Tonight, the elevator keeps its promise. It shudders into motion again, almost shy about it. The doors open onto a corridor that smells like salt and sleep. Paint the color of milk that forgot warmth, floor tiles that remember wheels more than footsteps. A sign reads specialty clinic, which is a polite way to label the drawer where the hospital keeps truths it cannot chart. Under that sign, a smaller one with rules that make your tongue feel heavier. If a patient grows aggressive, leave immediately. Do not de-escalate. If symptoms present, call a color you don't recognize and follow the arrows that know the shortest route to heat. You pass a plexiglass window where the night clerk sits with her gloves folded, her eyes walking the hall ahead of her. She nods to your badge, not your face, and you can't blame her. Names are just future noises. Inside, Ward 5 doesn't raise its voice. It has an institutional hush you could fold into a pillow. The whir of air handlers, the little clink of sterilization carts settling from a bump, the whisper of gown sleeves. Someone rolls a gurney past, and the sheet on it is tucked with a kindness that hurts more than panic ever could. You can't see the face beneath it, but you can hear the wheel that squeaks like a warning for children to get off the porch. The posted protocols are everywhere, backlit in frames, laminated to doors, taped beside sinks like prayers you can wash your hands with, and each line knows more than it says. In case of emergent biohazard, enact code lime. Mass sterilization may be triggered by authorized personnel. Safe zones include rooms 501, 510. Do not assume immunity. The edge of a rule brushes your shoulder like a moth. Staff must remain within assigned zones. Do not loiter in transfer corridors. Never stand with your back to a vent. It feels cute, superstitious, old school, like the little bits of folklore that hospitals acquire. The way some operating rooms won't run Schedule 13 cases on Fridays, because once someone did, and lights flickered for 14 minutes, folklorists still argue whether such taboos are pragmatic anxiety valves or ancestors wearing badges. But either way, tonight you read every line twice. You tuck the keycard into the pocket that sits nearer your pulse. It seems to settle there like it has done this many, many times. Down the hall, a monitor beeps with the steady oblivion of a metronome. It belongs to a patient who occupies the kind of coma that feels like it's listening, like a lake keeping the sky a secret. His chart calls him a regular. In the way storms are regular, he survives with a stubbornness that makes rules act like suggestions. You lift your hand to adjust a drip rate and stop. There's a printed line on the pole at eye level. Do not overcorrect. Let the hour tell you what it wants first. The thing about hours is that they are polite until they aren't. Ward 5's doors make a seal sound when they close, as if kissing their own edges. You test one with the back of your glove and feel the faintest vacuum tug, like a child insisting you pay attention. The cremation room is 2 corners away, which is a comfort and a threat at once. In another life, furnaces meant bread and warmth, and the cluck of a clock in a small kitchen. Here, the heat is a kindness with teeth. There's a laminated placard by the door. Check burners before loading. Confirm ID twice. Allow cooldown between cycles. Words arranged like railings never looked so thin. You take inventory the way people count rosaries, masks, shields, gowns, shoe covers, hair covers, gloves, second gloves. It's funny how armor can look like surrender when it's pale and crinkly. The nurse at the desk, her name tag fogged with breath, slides a tray toward you with your size in everything. She follows it with a look that says all the steps you know and one you don't. If you hear hissing, she says, stand still. The hissing you hear right now is just the air. The hissing you'll hear later won't be. Historical fact: the Winchester house was built with staircases to ceilings, doors to nowhere, corridors that loop like riddles. After a rainstorm in 1906 and an earthquake that unbuttoned its facade, people said the widow who built it believed the maze-like plan would confuse spirits. Historians still debate whether that was marketing after the fact or her true intent. You look at Ward 5's floor plan on a laminated map. See the loops and the safe rooms, the ways that don't go where they look like they go. And you understand why confusing visitors might be a survival skill, a quirky bit. Some medieval hospitals kept bells in rooms so the dying could ring when death arrived, though the bells weren't to summon help, but to warn the living to step back. People told each other that sound could carry contagion like a ferry. Same story, different river. The bell you have is electronic. It glows a soft green and promises it only calls colleagues, never conclusions. You tap it once to test and get a light blink from somewhere down the corridor, like a lighthouse trying not to wake the town. The rules tell you to keep moving. Denial encourages you to linger. You pick the rules. The vents along the ceiling are neat and identical, white grill over black throat. And the whisper they make is a ribbon. There's tape along a few vents' edges, as if someone earlier preferred belts and suspenders both. You remember the elevator's intercom, the way it gave your voice back to you with a timing that wasn't yours. And you decide that everything in this place is a kind of echo, polite now, impatient later. You read the last page of the protocol binder, because last pages are where people put the things they hope you won't get to. In an emergency, a mass sterilization of Ward 5 may be enacted. Safe zones include 501, 510. Staff rooms. Safeguards to these rooms can be shut off for a total sterilization of Ward 5. Lethal force may be used to prevent unauthorized exit. The fan hum sound from earlier feels different now, like breath that has learned how to count. You realize the story you're telling tonight is already pretending it isn't about you. Second person is a mirror that asks to be carried. You tuck the binder away. You start your round. The elevator that waits is not broken. It's considerate, pausing long enough for you to hear yourself breathing under the mask, for your gloves to make that soft plastic whisper when you flex your fingers, for the building to decide whether it likes your name the way it looks on a badge. You press B2 with your knuckle like you were taught. A little ritual to keep the day oils of your skin from making friends in the wrong places. And feel the smallest click, like a camera shutter in a museum you're not sure is open. The doors pull themselves together with the hush of late-night librarians, and your reflection blurs into two panels of brushed steel that each hold a slightly different version of your face. This is the part where the fan at home would turn one notch higher and your shoulders would drop. Here, the ceiling vent sighs on cue, the whisper of circulated air tracing the fine hairs at your wrist. You tell yourself the hum is harmless, a monotone lullaby for places that still have to work when the rest of the city has the decency to sleep. You tell yourself a lot of things down here. Between numbers, the car glides. Between floors, it hesitates. It's a small difference in sensation, but you mark it anyway, the way you would note a patient's eyelid twitch that didn't happen yesterday. The floor indicator ticks down, G1, L, B1, and then the light beneath B2 blinks, as if gathering its courage. The car decelerates to an almost stop, the cable above you murmuring in a tone that feels like metal trying to remember a song. And you can't help smiling at your own mind's quick tilt toward superstition. Pause long enough in a sealed box, and every molecule of air comes with a story attached. You reach out, not to press the button again, but to feel the cool ring of it with your glove, as if you could touch reassurance into it. The ring coolness seeping through the nitrile is real, it helps. So does talking softly under your breath, the way hosts do when they don't want to wake a room. We're fine. You've done this. Down is where tonight lives. The pitch you use is half whisper, half shrug, a voice you've practiced for nights when walls might overhear. The intercom crackles without your hand near it, static first, then a brief non-sound like a mouth, deciding whether to speak. You glance at the button call and decide not to press it, because the crackle felt a little like a question, and answering questions in boxes is how people learn new rules you weren't briefed on. The fan shifts registers, just a hair sharper, and you tilt your head to listen. Everyone knows about elevator phones catching the wrong frequency and pulling in cab dispatchers or late-night radio preachers. One hospital legend says a night tech once heard his own voice warning him to stay out of Ward 3. And when he didn't listen, he spent a month crawling out from under nightmares with white hair and a new respect for labels. Folklorists still argue whether such legends bloom because people need shape for their fear, or because, sometimes, shape is what fear wears to work. Either way, you hold your breath to see if the crackle shapes itself. It does. The word hello arrives, but not like hello, like heh low. The heh lagging behind the low by a heartbeat, the vowels leaning on each other, the way an echo does in a tunnel. You do the sensible thing and don't answer. The lighting overhead is the same warm not warm fluorescent every facility buys by the pallet. But one tube buzzes at a slightly different pitch. a mosquito tuning fork for anxieties you thought you outgrew. The doors don't open yet. The car isn't stuck. It's thinking. Maybe it's only a relay. Maybe the building is asking if you meant B1 instead. You tap the badge against your chest so you feel the card's rigid rectangle bump you. A rhythm that returns you to your body. Plastic meets sternum. Sternum hums back. A beat, a breath, the exhale fog against the mask, and the car finishes its thought. It slides down that last inch of indecision and kisses the sill with a soft, sturdy thump. You didn't pray, but something answered anyway. When the doors part, the air beyond is cooler, cleaner, with that faint chemical sweetness that rides shotgun with sterilizers. It smells like endings rehearsing themselves as beginnings. The corridor is brighter than your memory wants it to be, which somehow makes it feel further underground. Shadows are scarier when they have to work harder to exist. A sign to your right says sublevel access, and beneath, in smaller type, authorized personnel only, PPE required. There's a discreet camera bubble in the corner. Its red LED steady as a pulse ox doing its job, and you nod to it, a reflex you didn't know you had. The camera doesn't nod back. It doesn't need to. The tiny click you hear may be a lens adjust. Maybe nothing. Feels like a courtesy. The elevator dings behind you of its own accord, like a friend clearing its throat to remind you not to forget your umbrella. You glance back and find your reflection again, doubled and taller in the polished doors. For a second, the two of you are out of sync. Your head tilt is a fraction late in the steel. A late-night broadcast with just enough delay to put a hinge in your thinking. It corrects the moment you decide you don't mind. You step into the corridor, souls silent on a floor that looks mopped by someone who loves geometry. It's a hallway built by rules, lines straight, corners obedient, doors labeled in a font that assumes no jokes will be told here. Still, there's a kindness in the way the exit signs glow, a green you could wear to calm your heartbeat. The first door you pass is a supply closet. The second is a staff room with a narrow window thinly veiled by a paper sign. Don't remove PPE here. Someone added a smiley face to the bottom corner in yellow highlighter, and somehow it makes the order sound more final. Farther down, a heavier door sits idle with an illuminated badge reader and a little display, asleep until your keycard's shadow wakes it. You hold the purple rectangle like it's a tiny passport and give it to the reader. The reader chirps the least joyous chirp you've ever heard and turns its edge light from red to green. You think of traffic lights at 4 a.m. All that obedience with nobody to watch. The door seal gives that soft suction release, the sound you've already begun to think of as permission. Inside. Now, you can call it inside without lying. Ward 5's antechamber wears its rules out loud, posters on the walls, laminated. A family of rectangles arranged like picture frames in a house that values instruction more than faces. Entry prohibited without PPE. Physical contact prohibited without PPE. PPE removal only in designated rooms. No outside food or drink in staff rooms. Possible exposure requires immediate quarantine, minimum 48 hours. Patients leaving without discharge may be stopped by any means necessary. The phrasing is careful. It always is. It's the way institutions say, "We're sorry about the words. Believe the meaning." The intercom mounted above the PPE station beeps once. Your name appears on a small screen set into the desk, like a phone that forgot how to ring. Authorization confirmed, says the building, in the nice recorded voice that lives behind most hospital ceilings. You didn't give it your name in the elevator. You didn't give it your name at the door. You gave it a card, and that was enough. You slip into the gown one sleeve at a time, the crinkle like dry leaves, the tie at your neck, a clumsy ribbon you cinch twice, shoe covers over soles, hair cover, the elastic whisper catching one curl and setting it aside like a librarian returning a book to its shelf. Mask snug, shield down, gloves, then gloves again, the second pair a second chance. The weight of it makes your arms feel like a gentle weather front. You imagine being on camera, of course you are, and wave with two fingers as if to a friend in the booth. A history beat lands the way it does when conversation wants ballast in 1889 after a gas explosion in the Paris Opera's basement. Stagehands said they heard singing where there were no singers for 3 nights. Historians still debate whether it was warped pipes, grief's tinnitus, or the building settling its nerves. The point is relearning your ears. Down here, hisses and hums are not background. They are weather reports. The duct above you breathes without hurry, a well-behaved dragon biding its time. You catalog sounds, the drone of filtration, the creak of a gurney wheel at rest, the click of a keyboard somewhere behind glass, and a small tapping like a fingernail on formica that stops when you notice it. You learn to notice and not always react. That is its own PPE. Quirky tidbit, because your brain insists on trivia as a talisman. In some old European hospitals, nurses stuck iron pins into door frames to ward off the creeping. A catch-all for night air and nameless things. Iron was thought to sour whatever gnawed at thresholds. There are no pins here, just the clean seam of rubber gasket around a door that has decided draft is a synonym for danger. You trace the seam with your gaze and feel a portion of your breathing belong to the door's confidence. It's ridiculous. It helps. The antechamber's inner door carries a different weight, a heaviness you feel before you touch it. Your badge earns you that staccato chirp again, and the seal releases with a moist little kiss. The corridor beyond has a bend that keeps you from seeing more than 20 steps ahead, a deliberate curve like a chaperone's hand. You appreciate the architecture in the way. A swimmer appreciates the ladder on the far wall, not for what it is, but for what it promises if needed. You start down the bend, counting the ceiling tiles, because numbers sometimes turn fear into chores. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The fifth tile has a tiny scuff shaped like an eyelash. You decide to make it lucky. The elevator behind you dings again. Not open, not closing, just a little note on the hour. The recorded voice doesn't speak this time. It doesn't have to. The fan in the ceiling draws a long breath and lets it out on a new key. A shift half heard, like a story you've told before deciding to tell itself one different way tonight. This is where the second person curse works best. You keep saying you to mean anyone brave and awake after midnight, and the hall keeps answering like it knows your shoes. When you reach the corner, you don't peek around. You let your shoulder cross first, then the rest of you. A slow reveal, as if the hallway deserves the courtesy of not being startled. And there it is, the small, square observation window set into the first patient room door. Glass like a pond that's been told to stay calm. And beyond it, a monitor light that blinks as if trying to sync with your pulse. The elevator stays where it is, patient, like a friend who waits in the driveway with the engine running, not to rush you, but to remind you someone remembers the way homeward. 5's quiet rules don't bark. They lean in close and speak in the kind of voice that makes you nod before you realize you've agreed to anything. You stand in the antechamber long enough to read every laminated square twice, and the text begins to feel like a room filled with low lamps, gentle light, no shadows uninvited. Entry prohibited without PPE. Physical contact prohibited without PPE. Remove PPE only in designated rooms. No food. No drink. Report exposure. Quarantine minimum 48 hours. The phrases are crisp and bureaucratic, and somehow the crispness keeps your pulse steady. If anyone could make a lullaby out of hazard, it would be a committee that argues about commas until dawn. You roll your shoulders under plastic and let the second glove find the first glove's hand, like old friends reuniting after a problem they refuse to name. The inner door releases with that soft kiss of gasket parting, an intimacy between polymer and steel that implies loyalty. Inside, the temperature drops half a degree. It's nothing your body should notice, but it does, because bodies keep score of subtleties in places where subtleties are the first sign. The corridor is wider than you expect, like a theater aisle, with patient doors on one side and observation windows that collect light without reflecting you back. There's a sound you can't immediately place, not beeping, not whirring, something between a simmer and a sigh. Steam, you think, because there's a faint, wet warmth beyond the chill, as if the building sweats when it tries to be kind. You walk, and the soles of your covers whisper. The lights are bright enough for surgery, but they never feel like noon, more like noon telling a secret. Down the first stretch, a gurney rolls past. Pushed by hands, you don't see your eyes go to the sheet, tucked with that tender finality that hurts, and you catch the mild exhalation of heat slipping from a door near the bend to your left. The placard beside that door reads crematorium, a word that has learned to live in bold, sans serif, like it belongs on a map. The hiss you heard isn't angry, it's maintenance. A sound like a kettle that knows how to end a story without raising its voice. A rule on the wall proper to this spot is printed twice for emphasis. After use of steam sterilization equipment, confirm chamber cooldown before entry. The sentence is simple, and it touches something in you that isn't simple at all. The memory of being told to check the stove twice, to feel the pan's heat without touching it, to respect burn because it has a long, quiet memory. It should be macabre to find comfort near a furnace. It isn't, maybe because kindness here is a calculus that refuses drama. There's a cart of silver cylinders along the wall, neatly racked, each with a label as tidy as an apothecary's. Steam gun, side-checked, hose coiled like a patient snake, tools that are honest about their last resortness. You pass, resisting the urge to trace a finger over a label, and think, this is how love looks when it's made of policy. The murmuring heat slurs a little and eases back. Somewhere, a timer ends with a discreet tone that declines attention. You want to bow at the door, ridiculous as that is. Ritual helps. You keep walking instead. An observation window offers you a room not quite empty, with a bed made too neatly and a monitor idling, its line busy being flat in a way that defiantly says not dead yet, just not needed yet. You step closer and read the small white strip taped to the sill. First use room after sterilization cycle. Do not assign until 40 minutes elapsed. Rules that expect to be obeyed don't shout. They stand in good light. You catch your reflection faintly in the glass, and for a second, your mask looks like a hush placed directly over your intentions. That thought is almost funny. Almost. You move on. History tugs at your sleeve because your brain likes ballast when corridors don't blink. When the 1918 influenza pandemic was at its peak, some hospitals placed chairs outside isolation wards for family to sit and listen, because listening was all they could safely do. Historians still debate whether the practice arose from clinical caution alone or from older customs of vigil and keeping. Nights, when presence was a kind of antiseptic, you stand for a minute in a small alcove and do nothing but listen to this ward breathe. It isn't grief you hear, not yet. It's the hum of machines working at the polite speed hope prefers. Not rushed, not slow, faithful. The fan in the ceiling keeps the rhythm. You sync with it on purpose. Quirky bit. Some medieval infirmaries chalked a cross beneath the pillow like a sneaky sigil, not only for blessing, but to remind nurses which way to turn a dying patient, so the last gaze angled toward light, whether the practice was spiritual feng shui or a mnemonic for airflow and comfort, is the sort of detail that lets scholars smile without agreeing. Here, the pillow corners are hospital sharp, folds exact. No chalk allowed on surfaces. Still, someone has placed the bed, so the observation window catches the brightest of the fluorescent wash. Even geometry wants a gentle angle at the end. You clock it, because details are how dread wastes its time instead of spending yours. The posted safety precautions in each bay sharpen as you move. Ward 1. Human-adjacent physiologies. Ward 2. Hemivores. Eye protection mandatory. Ward 3. Unique morphologies. Specialist consult required. Ward 4. Mouth tracking enforced. Ward 5. Quarantine supersedes all. You already knew the categories. Seeing the signage sink its teeth into the walls is different. Words become a spine this place stands on. You pass a secondary PPE station with a mirror that catches you in 3 angles at once: front, left, right. And you study the small, ordinary asymmetries of your stance like they're clues. They aren't. They're just you, learning to belong to the environment without letting it remake your center. A soft squeal interrupts, the signature of a single gurney wheel that refuses to be shushed. It comes around the bend, with 2 security officers in silver suits guiding it, their mask visors reflecting the corridor as if they were full of hallway and no faces at all. On the sheet, a shape you will not name. One of the officers lifts a hand, not exactly to wave, more to acknowledge that you and they are both on the correct side of a script. Stand clear, a voice says through a voice module that sands down any emotion until nothing snaggy remains. You step back until your shoulder gently touches the wall, and the wall accepts you like a quiet elevator might accept a second passenger. The gurney passes. The hiss opens the crematorium door again. A minute later, a deeper hum steadies itself. It doesn't get louder. It doesn't need to. Your responsibilities are simple and not easy. Monitor rooms 510 to 520. Confirm medications administered. Confirm that no one tries to be heroic at the wrong speed. Call for security when people lie to themselves. You read the assignments on the tablet left for you at the desk. It's glass smeared with a tired thumb's map of earlier hours. Names you don't know yet, numbers you do. HR, BP, SBO2, RR. The units of ordinary. The thought that the ordinary units might be all that stands between a person and panic is oddly comforting. Numbers will hold your hand if you don't ask them to sing. You start with 510 because starting anywhere else feels like a dare. Between rooms, a poster repeats what you already read and adds 2 lines you somehow missed. In the event of a mass sterilization order, safe zones are the staff rooms and quarantine rooms 501, 510. Safeguards to these rooms may be disabled during a total sterilization of Ward 5. You consider the sentence structure, how it avoids the word override, and yet promises the same. You imagine the logic tree in the control system. All those if-then clauses blooming open like night flowers. You glance toward 501 down the other arm of the hall and let your eyes rest on the door number until it feels like a friend you haven't met yet. Steam whispers again, a fresh exhale. It comes with a faint, clean smell, metallic, and sweet the way rain tastes when you stick your tongue out at it on purpose. You picture pipes, valves, the guts of the building practicing. You do not picture bodies. Practice is what keeps mercy from improvising. The quiet that follows is heavier than before, but not hostile weight you can lean into if you're tired. Someone coughs behind a door 3 rooms away. One cough only, a hand-caught, ordinary sound, and you feel your shoulders loosen because the ordinary still happens here, even now. History leans back in with a different register. In 1848, when the first public health boards were trying to make sense of cholera's spread, some hospitals posted printed lists at ward doors: wash hands, boil linens, burn straw mattresses after use, and neighbors mocked the theater of it until numbers changed their jokes. Historians still debate how much compliance came from fear, how much from trust, and how much from the relief people feel when someone finally says, "Do this, and we will do it together." You think of commenters leaving their locations under a video, cities and times building a map of wakeful strangers, and you understand. Collective ritual is a kind of hallway, too. You reach 510. The observation window offers a room that is no longer pretending to be empty. A bed. A figure sleeping, as if sleep were something you could decide to do to the world instead of yourself. The monitor breathes in green. You watch the line draw its tidy architecture of life, peaks, valleys, the polite stairs of a respiratory trace. And you hear, beneath the electronics, the smallest hitch in the ventilated air, the kind of hitch ducks make when filters catch a heavier moment and swallow. The posted card beside the window repeats the ritual for entry. Guard present, PPE check. Announce yourself before crossing threshold. Do not approach within arm's length until patient answers. Retreat at first sign of agitation. You whisper your name and the time under your breath anyway, as if the door appreciates accuracy. Behind you, a wheel squeaks once and goes silent, as if embarrassed to have spoken out of turn. You memorize the protocols not because you lack faith in yourself, but because faith behaves better with choreography. Close this door. Face that vent. Keep that keycard where muscle remembers it. Call if a color you don't yet know is announced. The steam hush down the hall returns, blends with the fan in the ceiling above like 2 low flutes, practicing scales. They intend to play for someone who needs sleep. The gurney you saw earlier will return empty. The cart of cylinders will one day not be full. The tablet will grow a new smear of thumb, yours. All of this is both expectation and prayer. The kiss sound of a door seal, somewhere behind you again. And you, standing still until the sound finishes, the way you would at a crosswalk, where the city has decided you deserve to arrive the patient who won't die breathes, like a room that refuses to be vacant. A soft in and out that keeps time with the green stair step on the monitor. You stand at the observation window, let the glass cool your forehead through the face shield. A small, guilty luxury, like pressing your cheek to a winter bus window as a kid, daring the cold to tell you a new rule. His chart calls him a regular, which is the sort of word you use when you don't want to say anchor or omen. He wears stillness the way some people wear uniforms. Tubing arranges itself across his chest in lines that look like someone drew a map to a place with only one street. You say your hello under your breath, because if walls can remember breath, they can remember manners. You tick the boxes that prove being present. Check IV sight, confirm flow, glance at pupils through half-lidded lashes. Listen to the machine that listens for you. The monitor responds with a cooperative chorus, pulse steady, oxygen not panicking, pressure making its patient climb. Little numbers like campfire sparks, tame and bright. There's a point in every shift where the gear stops being noise and becomes company. Tonight, that point arrives with no fuss at all. The drip clamp sliding one notch feels like tuning a guitar string you won't play. Your gloved fingers remember the pressure needed to stop before better becomes worse. Ritual is a rope you hold so you don't have to stare down. Something else is listening, too. It isn't a presence, nothing so dramatic. It's a quality the room has, a way the air seems to lean toward any sound you make. The whisper of plastic on plastic when your sleeve brushes the rail. The monitor seems to skip, not a number, but a mood, as if its line has ears. You chalk it up to fatigue, which is one way to pocket a ghost and carry on. The overhead vent exhales in your particular direction for 2 beats, and then eases off, like a cat fainting affection, smirking, then pretending it never cared. You adjust your stance so your back isn't to the door or the vent, because even if superstition is a hat, it's a warm one. You talk like a host again, that low, steady Wednesday midnight tone from a channel that learned how to live under the algorithm's ceiling, gentle, exact, never telling the room more than it needs to know. If the mic was live, you drop a normalizing tip, now light and shade. Don't push the fright too early. Save your crescendo for when the audience's pulse asks you to. But here, the only audience is the patient who is not performing. A little sarcasm keeps the edges from fraying. You, my friend, are already more cooperative than 1,000 comment sections. It's a joke that harms nobody. And anyway, the only witness is a machine that refuses to laugh. On the counter, the tablet waits with a courtesy it can't feel. You open the record and skim what the day shift left, like you're reading the last page of a book, first to decide if it's safe to invest. Notes about pain on presentation. Bowel issues you skate around, because if you name that memory, now your lungs will climb your ribs. Sedation protocol, observation. Surgical attempt hours ago to fix what was torn. A line you read twice. Unclear survival prognosis. Continue supportive measures. The words are hospital neutral, but they fold in on themselves like a paper crane that knows it's a swan in the wrong story. you tap the field to add your presence. Night round commenced, vitals within tolerance, no agitation. Saving a note always feels like tapping a talisman. A small phenomenon, the monitor tone slides down a half step for 3 breaths, as if it exhaled a joke you didn't hear. Then it returns, pretending it never left. You could chase it. You don't. There's a kind of composure that grows in places like this. A refusal to turn every flicker into a headline. Folklore thrives on flickers because they're the gaps where we plant our need to know. You let the flicker be a flicker. That feels like a promise you can keep. History leans in again because pasts like to be consultants. In London's plague years, some infirmaries hung sprigs of herbs above beds, rosemary, rue, lavender, not because botanicals could stop bad air in its tracks, but because the living needed something to smell besides fear. Historians still debate whether the practice provided any clinical advantage, or simply disguised the scent of endings with nicer endings. You make a mental note of the way this room smells, antiseptic with a thread of laundry, and under that, the human tin of warm coin. It is wildly ordinary. It is a mercy. A quirky bit insists on arriving to cheapen and potentiate the moment all at once in some mountain clinics in Eastern Europe. A folk custom claimed that placing a cup of water on a windowsill invited a house spirit to drink the patient's fever. If the cup was empty in the morning, you were to thank the unseen by tapping the sill 3 times. You find yourself glancing at the room's broad windowsill. It holds nothing now, just a folded blanket like an obedient shadow. You don't place a cup. You do tap the door frame once with your knuckle, because superstition and self-soothing share a table, and you're not going to insult either of them tonight. Time is viscous here. Your watch ticks like it's narrating someone else's evening. You think about the patient's name. No, you don't. Names have a way of turning the mind toward photographs you didn't mean to carry. He's a he because the chart said so. He's a he because the jawline under the tape says so. He's a he because his hands, even flattened by sedation, remember fists. You catch your own reflection again, a smudge behind a shield, behind a pane, and the distance between the two of you is the exact width of protocol. That distance keeps people alive. That distance sometimes feels like pulling a blanket over your own head and calling it weather. The corridor murmurs beyond. A wheel, a murmur, a hint of steam. The soft-footed language of staff in suits that hide their faces and their fatigue equally well. No one rushes. Rush is a kind of confession down here. The annunciator on the wall clicks to life. A gentle tone, one word, a color you still don't know. Then silence, like a throat clearing and deciding against speech. Your name glides across the small display behind the desk downhall, confirming that your presence is where it should be. The building's way of saying, I see you. You nod to it, because politeness is an armor you can wear under plastic and over bone. The patient, for now, still insists on being here, hasn't moved. His lashes don't flutter, but somehow the corners of his eyes look more restful than they did when you arrived. It's nonsense. You allow it anyway. You think of the idea that some machines perform better when they're convinced someone is watching. A notion that lives somewhere between psychology and myth. Maybe monitors are the same. Maybe rooms are. Maybe the simple act of breathing with a place teaches it to breathe calmer. That's the kind of thought you'd tuck between paragraphs if a mic were on, and 1,000 strangers were curled into blankets, listening for a voice that won't flinch. You check the keycard in your pocket, because you promised you would. Habit, half paranoia, and find its corners exactly where you left them. One edge pressing a soft square into your thigh. There are worse brands to wear. The patient's exhale lengthens and smooths, and you imagine the room conceding. Fine, you can stay. You could talk about the way staircases in a certain old house lead nowhere on purpose, to confuse what follows, to buy a little time from whatever insists. Historians still debate if that house was a labyrinth for spirits, or an answer to an earthquake that resculpted intentions. The image is useful either way. These protocols are staircases that go where fear can't. Before you move to the next door, you lean in just enough to fog the corner of your shield and draw a small circle with your thumb on the plastic. A nothing gesture that feels like signing a guest book. The circle evaporates as if embarrassed. You whisper the time again and let your feet rediscover the corridor's tempo. That measured hush step that tells the night you know how to walk through it. Behind you, the monitor keeps listening, as if it has questions it will not ask while you're in the room. You leave the door as you found it. Rules intact, air steady, promise kept. The unfamiliar emergency code arrives like a polite throat clear over the ceiling speaker. 2 notes, a color that doesn't live in your training, and then the soft chime of compliance, followed by your name on the tiny desk display you didn't log into. It shouldn't know you. It does. The letters slide across like a quiet tide spelling out the shore. You glance at the dead center camera bubble in the hall and give the barest nod that says, understood, even though you don't. Not yet. The elevator far behind answers with a single ding. One of those reassuring noises buildings make when they want to pretend they aren't paying attention. You check your pocket for the keycard by touch, counting the corners with a thumb. The way you count rosary beads, or the seconds after someone says wait. The tablet at the desk wakes before your fingers reach it. Its glass a small rectangular moon in the ward's artificial day. The notification panel shows your ID ribboned along the top, as if you logged in an hour ago and simply forgot. The last action is stamped with your name. You didn't take that action. It's a tiny dissonance, like catching your voice in an empty stairwell, a fraction behind your breath. You scroll anyway, because dissonance can sit down if you keep moving. Code lime. The word you heard when that first gurney turned a corner and the air tightened like a belt. Lime, a citrus name for something that doesn't taste like anything rules, and heat. The short text under it reads, "Isolate, direct to 5, minimize staff." Your fingertip hovers over acknowledge. You press without thinking, institutional muscle memory. The way a door opens when you show it the face it expects. A soft hiss comes from the vent above the junction by 512, as if the building just relieved a pressure you didn't feel. The hiss is a comfort. It's the sound of a system that knows where its valves live. Your name flashes again on the desk display, this time with a small arrow pointing toward the corridor elbow where the sightline kinks. You didn't tell it you were here. It didn't ask permission to know. Little things like that can become teeth if you let them. You let them be commas instead. On with the sentence. You've spent enough nights in institutions to know that codes come in flavors: administrative theater, real danger, and the uneasy third type that moves like weather in a place with no windows. This one belongs to the third family. The next chime is softer, a courtesy tap at a door you didn't ask to open. You imagine a hand behind the walls, passing messages along to the places that breathe, telling the ducts to change the key of their hum. The thought is ridiculous and soothing at once. You haven't slept enough for either quality to win outright. The corridor light shifts a fraction colder, the kind of adjustment that's more about cameras than people. You hear almost a rolling cart slow, then decide not to arrive at that sound with your eyes. The posted placard between rooms reminds you who you are down here. No entry without guard. Announce yourself. Retreat at first sign of agitation. Don't talk anyone down. Rules that could be about conversations as easily as bodies. The next display message is not a message. It's your name once more, now styled in a font that looks fractionally heavier, like someone pressed harder on the label maker. You can't help the soft huff of a laugh. It fogs your shield and clears quickly. "All right," you whisper to the ward. "You've got me. Show me where." History reaches up through the floorboards because it likes to think it knows you. During the 1665 plague in London, some parishes chalked names on doors to mark the sick inside. Historians still debate whether the practice was for tallying, warning, compassion, or control. But the chalk dust in the cracks of those thresholds lasted longer than the fever. Your name on screens that shouldn't know it feels like a gentler chalk, but chalk all the same. You don't recoil. The truth is, being seen in the right place at the right moment is one of the few miracles logistics can offer. A quirky scrap insists on curling around your ankle. In certain folk belief pockets, mirrors were covered when someone in the house was ill, not only to keep spirits from slipping through, but to prevent the room from memorizing the face of sickness and reflecting it back later. You think of the observation windows, glass that doesn't reflect so much as suggest, and you're grateful again for the angle of the light. The ward knows better than to give you your own face unless you ask. The display arrow nudges again, like a polite friend who's bad at pretending it's not urgent. You take the hint, moving to the elbow, where the corridor bends away from the staff room doors into the quieter wing, where 518 and 519 sit. As you near, the intercom whispers the color once, softer than a lullaby. Lime. No siren. No sprint. The kind of calm that feels like the hush before a performance you didn't consent to star in. You look through 519's window and find the small, indefinable thing that makes rooms feel inhabited even when the bed's empty. A fold in the sheet that didn't make itself. A chair moved a foot from where the floor scuff says it belongs. You don't open the door. The rules aren't suggestions, they're spells that only work if you say them exactly. There's a guard already on approach, silver suit, visor and uncooperative mirror, moving with that efficient quiet that isn't stealth so much as respect. You raise your hand in hello and tilt your head toward the door. The guard nods and stops short of the threshold, as if the air has markings you can't see. Through the speaker in their mask, the voice comes polite and genderless. Hold position, will confirm assignment. The desk panel obliges with a threaded list of rooms, asterisks between names that indicate some invisible triage logic. Your name sits beside 517 and 518. The system has drawn the lines for you. Tonight will be about coloring inside them at speed. The elevator dings again. One note, not a summons, just the memory of upstairs. Strange how quickly you learned to measure comfort by the persistence of distant, irrelevant sounds. If that ding stopped, the silence would be a new code. A steady, low chuff drifts down the hall from the crematorium. Steam has a way of sounding like common sense when you need it to. The guard at your side tracks your gaze, then returns it to the window. Unspoken agreement that heat is mercy in a place that cannot be generous any other way. The tablet vibrates. A new line drops into the log for 518. Possible agitation, unknown exposure, maintain distance, announce. The building's courtesy reaches for your hand without touching it. You stand in the doorway rectangle the way you were trained. Feet where the tape would be, if anyone bothered with tape. Shoulders squared to the hinge in case physics decides to audition for a role. You announce yourself in that calm channel voice, close, kind. Without the sugar some people pour on fear to make it drinkable. Night nurse doing a pass. No contact. The room remains a room. The monitor inside answers with a tiny uptick, like a heartbeat that remembered to climb a stair. The desk display hums your name one more time, and then, blessedly, falls quiet. It knows where you are now. Perhaps that will be enough for a while. The intercom doesn't speak. You can feel the ward's attention slide off you like water, finding an easier path downhill. It's not personal. It's gravity. You exhale and let your shoulders drop a centimeter, as if that single centimeter could be banked for later. History again, because you've started feeding yourself little facts, the way people slip mints to their mouths in church in 1854, when John Snow mapped cholera cases around the Broad Street pump. Some households begged not to be marked. Historians still debate whether their refusals came from shame, superstition, or simple fear of being counted into a narrative they didn't choose. You look at your NEAT assignments and feel a complicated gratitude that this counting, this assignment of you to doorways, refuses to be about shame. It's about flow, valves, heat, and time. It's unromantic. It will save someone, if not now, then later. The quirky brainworm drops one last tidbit at your feet. Some sailors' folk tales say that if you speak a storm's name, you give it a handle to grab you by, which is why good captains call bad weather that and this. You decide, here and now, to call this color by its rule, and not what it brings. Lime is a word that keeps your tongue flat. You'll leave other names for later, for when you're safely upstairs, and the elevator has permission to be only an elevator again. You move on, the corridor's curve guiding you like a parent guiding a child who insists on walking, not being carried. The small screen stops writing your name, which somehow proves it was watching all along. The fan in the ceiling returns to its earlier key, the gentler one you've decided to call G because it feels like good. Your hands remember their tasks. Your breath remembers it's a metronome and not a drummer. The ward remembers you are here to do the next indicated thing. No more, no less. Somewhere behind you, a seal kisses a door closed, a sound you're learning to count like a benediction. You count 1, then move toward 2. 517 answers you first, not with sound, but with the fact of a shadow where a shadow shouldn't be. A gray slant on the far wall that doesn't match the geometry of lamp and bed, as if the room had practiced dusk in a place that doesn't have a sky. The observation glass takes it in without judgment, and the posted card beside the handle repeats the choreography that keeps night from inventing new steps. So you speak the hello that is really a password and wait for your own voice to finish before letting the silence return to its work. The way good nurses set down a tray and let gravity prove it remembers how to hold things up. The guard's visor keeps being a hallway instead of a face, which helps, because faces have a way of making promises they can't keep. And the door keeps being a rule instead of a trap, which helps more, because rules here are a kind of mercy that doesn't need applause. You mark the time on the tablet in tidy digits, a small census of minutes that behave themselves. And if the little vibration that follows feels like the building patting your shoulder, you allow the illusion, because usefulness and comfort sometimes share a coat, and nobody down here is going to ask to see its ID. The monitor beyond the glass drifts 1 beat longer on the exhale, and then corrects, as if embarrassed, returning to the polite metronome the room prefers, while the ceiling vent above your left shoulder lowers its key a fraction, trading the bright hum of alert for something closer to murmur. And this is how the ward says good job without using words that might echo wrong. And this is how you answer without speaking, by staying exactly the size you are, not larger, not smaller. A person-shaped wedge holding the corridor's curve open for another minute to pass through without snagging. A memory that is not yours leans in, the way old houses lean when the tour guide pauses. Staircases that arrive at walls on purpose, doors that open onto a drop of 3 inches just to slow a step that wanted to run. A labyrinth built less to trap than to make pursuit clumsy. Historians still argue whether the strangest parts were original or added later by owners who loved a story more than a ledger. But the quarrel itself is useful here because it reminds you architecture can be a decision and a rumor at once. And tonight you need both, the decision in your hands, the rumor in the air that keeps people cautious and alive. The tablet's list redraws itself with the soft arrogance of software that thinks it is the weather, assigning you a narrow loop, 517, 518, desk, repeat. And the repetition calms the part of your brain that counts exits while pretending not to. This is a loop you can walk until morning, or until morning remembers how to arrive here, where clocks perform daylight without ever letting it in, and you hold the keycard like a metronome in your pocket, the card's edges tracing a square on your thigh that will be a bruise later, a geometry you will trust more than dreams. You let your voice find its broadcast again, a low weave of vowels meant to lay over surfaces like gauze, not to press, not to pry, just to keep the air company. If a mic were live, this would be where you remind anyone listening to drink water and unclench a jaw they forgot they were wearing. And even without a mic, you say it anyway, because sometimes the room is the audience, and sometimes the room is the guest. And either way, tone is a kind of glove that keeps the skin of meaning from catching on metal. From the crematorium's mouth, steam speaks in present tense, a soft sermon about valves and thresholds, about heat as a boundary that refuses drama. It arrives, it does its work, it leaves no headline. And that is the ethic you envy, because your work, announcing, logging, not entering, is the quietest kind of insistence, a refusal to turn the wheel that would make anything louder than necessary. And the only applause you want is the elevator's distant, irrelevant ding still showing up on time. A map builds itself behind your eyes, not of this corridor only, but of older streets where dots once clustered around a pump and a handle was lifted away. And whether the legend is tidy memory or tidy myth, the lesson remains sturdy. Sometimes the kindest action is subtraction. Sometimes the safest presence is a line you do not cross. And drawing that line with your body in a doorway counts as a public health intervention, even if the public is 2 rooms, 3 names on a tablet, and the hush of a fan willing to be the village for a night. 517 stays itself, which is all you asked. 518 answers with a light that blinks in time with your breath for 4 cycles, and then chooses its own rhythm again. A small negotiation between machinery that, like each other, won't admit it. The guard tips their head once. A bow you return, as if there were an altar here, and maybe there is, built of gasket kisses and laminated rules. And you feel the ordinary arrive like a train, easing into a station that nobody announced, which is to say, relief without ceremony. This is how the hour passes. The corridor learning your footfall and forgiving it. The glass accepting your reflection only when invited. The vents moving air like a chorus that refuses a solo. The tablet adding your initials to a column that will look, in daylight, like nothing special, which is the point when you finally step back from the elbow where the sightline kinks. You do it in the measured way people leave pews at the end of a hymn, not to make a scene, not to startle the silence, only to let the next verse happen where you were standing, and to let standing count. Night decides to be generous in the only currency it has left. Uneventful minutes that line up like quiet chairs along the corridor, each one a place to sit the body inside the suit of rules. And let the heartbeat be ordinary, the vents purr in their patient key. The monitor in 517 keeps its staircase neat, and the crematorium exhales on schedule. A soft sermon of heat that refuses spectacle. The building's way of saying mercy can be mechanical and still be real. You walk the loop the tablet drew for you. 517, 518, desk, repeat. And the repetition becomes a handrail the mind clings to without having to look, a practiced choreography of gloved knuckles on door frames, low-voiced announcements that are passwords as much as courtesies, and the little digital acknowledgments that bloom on glass like tame fireflies, the system's version of a nod from a colleague across a busy room. At the elbow of the corridor, the camera bubble glints once and then pretends it didn't, an eye deciding against blinking. The desk display behaves, resisting the impulse to write your name again in that heavier type. And the elevator in the distance keeps its irrelevant kindness, single dings that mark the hour, by insisting the rest of the hospital still has an upstairs, which is a way of saying the world hasn't ended, only narrowed. A sound like fabric remembering how to be still comes from 518. Nothing urgent, just the small hallucinatory acoustics of fatigue, measuring the room too closely. So you let the rules do the listening first. Announce, wait, do not enter without the guard. Do not approach without an answer. And the guard at your shoulder answers with a nod that is almost a bow. The silver visor reflecting the corridor so perfectly that your own outline looks like a rumor the glass might be telling itself to pass the time. When dread tries to cheat with speed, you slow the sentence on purpose. The way the vent lowers its key a fraction, the way the light at the observation window never quite makes a mirror, the way the gasket kisses the jamb when a seal closes somewhere behind you. Detail is a lever you know how to pull, a trick honest enough to keep tonight from inventing new terrors just to feel important, and honest enough to keep you from naming storms in a place that survives by using numbers and colors. Instead, a memory of a map blooms in the tidy part of your brain, the pump with the handle taken off, cases turning from cluster to story, subtraction as intervention. And whether you learned the tidy legend or the messy one doesn't matter here. What matters is that you are a handle tonight, removed not from compassion, but for it. A subtraction that keeps a corridor from flooding with the wrong kind of traffic. And the tablet's neat columns are your proof that prevention can look like boredom from the right angle. 517 remains a room, which is all you asked. Its monitor does that human thing machines sometimes do when watched, behaves better as if performance were contagious. And you don't argue with the superstition, because it works both ways. Discipline caught from devices that never flinch, and calm caught from a fan that won't solo. A choir of ducts and rules and schedules that let your pulse borrow their rhythm for the price of staying. A thought that belongs to houses with unhelpful staircases passes through like a draft. Architecture that makes pursuit clumsy, thresholds that insist on care, angles that slow even certainty. Historians will keep arguing over whether those decisions were safety, sorrow, or good marketing. But you accept the parable at face value, because this ward is its own strange floor plan, and you are here to keep the chase from happening at all by making motion deliberate, by turning every door into a question that must be answered correctly. The crematorium hushes again, not louder, not softer, exactly itself. And the steam's brief sweetness threads the antiseptic like a line of music under dialogue. Heat does its work without asking to be understood, and you let that be a model. Do the next indicated thing, log the time, trust the gasket, or the keycard square against your thigh like a brand that says unglamorous authority. The kind of authority that would rather be invisible and effective than brave and photogenic. When you finally lean your knuckles to 517's frame one more time, the wood receives the pressure as if it has been waiting specifically for this minute. As if all corridors are made of audience when the performance is restraint. You speak your name again in the tone that never startles. You listen for nothing and accept it as good news. And you let the uneventful minute take its seat with the others. Another quiet chair lined up along the night, the row growing longer, the room learning you as something it can keep. The ward earns the rare gift it almost never asks for, a stretch of minutes with no new shapes on the gurneys, no new colors on the speaker, no new names on the tablet queue, just the corridor keeping its breath even, and the vents keeping their soft key. A choir of systems agreeing to be background, so that the work of staying can sound like nothing at all, which is the most expensive sound to buy down here, and the one worth the most when it arrives. Plain and true. You keep the loop gentle. 517. 518. Desk. Repeat. Because rhythm is leverage. Slow when dread tries to sprint. Let detail carry weight. Let the light at the glass refuse to make a mirror. Count the gasket kisses like stations of a route you could walk blind. And if the the sentence lengthens to hold the quiet. You let it lengthen. A deliberate tempo that tells the body its fear is heard without being obeyed. A pacing trick you learned the hard way and kept because it keeps you control of information is the ward's favorite instrument. You meter what you say the way the tablet meters what it shows, neither stingy nor indulgent, never giving the corridor a headline it hasn't earned. And the restraint is not just style, but engineering, flow management with manners. Because suspense is a valve as much as a feeling. And good valves avoid floods without pretending the river isn't there. 517 offers its steady staircase. 518 answers with a blinking that sinks to your breath for exactly 4 cycles and then reconsiders. And you take that as the room practicing boundaries. Perform, pause, perform peaks and valleys the way music breathes. The way a night survives itself by letting high and low trade places without judging which one counts more. Because both are part of the keeping. The guard's visor keeps reflecting corridor instead of face, which continues to help because faces beg for stories and corridors prefer roots. Your voice keeps to the low, broadcast timbre that lays gauze over surfaces without pressing. A tone designed to move air without stirring dust. And even in a narrative that hungers for shocks, you trust the slow burn, the small sensory anchor, the widened sentence that tucks panic into syntax, until panic falls asleep on its own. A parable returns because it's useful. The handle taken off a pump so the map could change shape. Whether the legend is clean or messy, the lesson is the same: subtraction as intervention, patience as action. So you are content to be missing where catastrophe would prefer you present. A human handle removed with care, logging times instead of outcomes, which is the sort of arithmetic that looks like nothing and adds up to everything somewhere beyond the elbow. A seal settles with that affectionate kiss you've decided to name and count. Somewhere beyond the elbow, heat performs its unsentimental mercy and leaves behind air that smells like work done correctly. Somewhere between those two somewheres, your pocket square of authority presses its soft corner into your thigh, and the Brewsterby feels like a signature, the kind only quiet nights can witness, and only quiet mornings will believe. The tablet redraws your circuit one last time, and then, in a rare concession, stops offering advice. It has learned your gait the way you learned the duck's key, and that reciprocity is the closest thing to trust the ward can afford. A compact between systems and a single body about when to speak and when to leave well enough alone. An editorial decision with clinical consequences and narrative dignity in equal measure when you lean your knuckles to 518 for the final pass of this hour. The wood receives the pressure as if it were waiting specifically for this touch at this minute. And you give the room the password hello, and the room gives you back nothing in return. And you take that nothing and place it with the other preserved nothings on the quiet chair row you've been building all night, a museum of uneventful moments, carefully curated to outnumber the ones that had teeth, you turn toward the desk with the measured ease reserved for ending hymns. And the corridor lets you. No new codes, no new colors, nothing to chase you or to be chased, only the hush of a place that understands how to pace itself when survival requires patience, and how to let patience be action when action would be vanity. The loop holds, the hour holds, you hold, and the night, persuaded, decides to hold with you a little longer. The quiet holds long enough to feel earned, not gifted, a balance of rise and fall. The corridor seems to understand on instinct, letting tension idle at a humane idle instead of idling like a threat. The systems performing their modest choreography so precisely that the absence of news reads as news. And in a ward that measures worth by what doesn't happen, that absence feels profoundly alive. You keep the information narrow and exact. No extra nouns for panic to wear. No adjectives that would crowd the air, because suspense here is a valve, not a spectacle, turned by hand in quarter turns to keep the pressure where it belongs. And restraint, unfussy and repeatable, proves itself again as both craft and engineering, pacing the minutes so they arrive in the order bodies can use. Your loop remains a sentence with reliable punctuation. 517, 518, desk, repeat. And the clause between each stop is a breath the night can borrow. When the urge to hurry taps at your heel, you lengthen the line on purpose. Let sensory anchors carry load, the gasket's kiss, the duck's key, the non-reflecting glass. Because calm made visible is a kind of ladder, and ladders are for coming back down without slipping. Raising stakes, you've learned, is not always adding fire. Sometimes it's subtracting exits with kindness, trimming the sentence so only essential verbs remain: stand, announce, wait, so that consequence sharpens without noise. And what could have been melodrama becomes stewardship, the ward's version of a tight edit that respects both audience and subject by refusing bloat. 517 answers with its staircase of green. 518 sinks to your breath for exactly 4 and drifts. A small proof that pacing is duet, not diktat. Peaks and troughs, exchanging custody of the hour, so no single moment has to carry everything. And the slow burn and tension you've repeated all night pays out in an ordinary present tense, which, in this place, is the genre's most difficult trick. Even the elevator plays its part, offering the irrelevant ding that reminds the story it has an outside. You accept it as the minimal catharsis quiet horror allows, the cut to a wider shot, the hint of sky you don't need to see, because endings here do not close a fist so much as relax a hand, letting the reader stand up without flinching and walk, still listening, toward a door that opens like a sentence, finishing on time. The tablet, satisfied you've learned its gait, stops coaching. This is the cleanest beat you can give the hour. A fall after rise, a reflective trough with no twist hidden inside, and you let it be exactly that, structure doing its job without flourish. so that when the next measure asks for more, the memory of balance is recent and reachable. At the elbow, the camera bubble chooses not to blink. You answer by not performing, by offering only the password hello, and the mapped patience of a body that refuses to improvise at the edge of rules. Suspense remains a controlled pour. Mood remains an honest temperature. And ambiguity is permitted only where it comforts rather than corrodes. Another seal kisses somewhere behind you, counted and shelved with the others. Another breath goes in, measured, goes out, measured. Another minute takes its chair in the tidy row of minutes that will be the thing you saved tonight when saving had to look like nothing. And in the ledger you'll keep for yourself later, you will give this sequence its own small title, Corridor Kept. You press your knuckles to 518 one last time this circuit. The wood receives the pressure as if waiting for this exact second. You speak the greeting that is also the oath. The room gives you back unremarkable quiet. You place it with care beside the other unremarkable quiets, a gallery of negative miracles. And you turn toward the desk at a pace that could teach a heart how to end a chapter without slamming the cover shut. The hour edges forward with the modest confidence of a metronome that's done a lifetime of service, clicking not to call attention to itself, but to keep other things honest. And the corridor accepts the gift, giving nothing back that has teeth, just the ordinary compliances of systems behaving, the kind of uneventful sequence that feels quietly, stubbornly earned. Information stays narrow on purpose, names, rooms, timestamps, because breadth would only feed speculation, and speculation is a fuel the ward cannot afford. Instead, there is measured cadence, controlled pour valves turned by quarter turns, a rhythm that matches the body's capacity for meaning so nothing spills. And in that editorial mercy, the night discovers its balance again. Your loop keeps its punctuation, 517, 518, desk, repeat. And the tactile anchors keep their appointments. The gasket's soft kiss somewhere down the hall, the duct's steady key, the glass that refuses your reflection unless invited. These are small literary devices disguised as infrastructure, pacing tools that make calm visible so it can be participated in rather than merely hoped for. You resist the easy escalation, raising stakes by subtraction. Instead, fewer exits, kinder rules, simpler verbs, stand, announce, wait, letting consequence sharpen, without spectacle so stewardship, not shock, holds the center, a landing that sticks, because it respects what the story asked of breath, and returns some of it with interest. 517 offers its tidy staircase of green. 518 sinks to your breath for 4 beats, and then elects its own tempo, a courteous duet between vigilance and rest. The elevator far away contributes its irrelevant ding to prove there is an upstairs, and you accept the sound as the smallest possible epilogue, an implied horizon instead of a curtain drop. The tablet, satisfied, retires from commentary. No prompts, no nudges, just your initials tucked into a column that will look like good housekeeping in daylight. And like survival, when you remember how the hour could have gone a different way, this is the kind of cadence quiet horror favors, a letting down without letting go. At the elbow, the camera bubble does not blink, and you do not perform. You give the password hello in the tone that never startles, and the corridor responds with nothing new to carry, which is exactly the weight the hour can hold. Ambiguity is permitted only where it soothes, not where it frays. Another seal settles with that affectionate kiss. Another measured breath joins the row. Another minute takes its chair among the preserved nothings that turn into a ledger of kept thresholds, a gallery of negative miracles curated in real time. Each label a simple thing. 517 remained a room. 518 remained a room. The hall remained a hall. When you press your knuckles to 518 for the last pass of this circuit, the wood receives the pressure, as if waiting specifically for this second. You speak the oath-shaped greeting. The room gives you back unremarkable quiet. You place it carefully with its neighbors on the shelf you've been building all night. And then you turn toward the desk at a pace that teaches the heart how to end a chapter without slamming the cover, leaving the hinge oiled for whatever comes next. The vents keep their key. The lights keep their decision not to be a mirror. The elevator keeps its irrelevant song. The ward keeps you, and you keep the ward. And between those two keepings, the hour closes like a door that knows how to kiss the jam and not wake the sleepers. A finish that is not finale, but rest, which is, tonight, the bravest possible ending. The hour's last inches arrive without ceremony. The way a well-oiled hinge finds the jam and kisses it once, light enough not to wake sleepers, firm enough to count as closure. The vents keep their key. The glass keeps its decision not to mirror, and the corridor keeps its promise to remain a corridor, which is all the bravery the night required of this place, and of the person-shaped wedge standing inside it, steady and present. Information remains exact, and small rooms, times, names, because endings in quiet work best when they refuse garnish. The cadence stays measured, a controlled pour that leaves no puddles and no lack. And the shape this makes in the air is the gentlest kind of period, a dot that doesn't bruise the page it rests on. Your loop retains its punctuation. 517, 518, desk, repeat, and the anchors do their work one last time. The gasket's soft kiss somewhere down the hall, the duct's unwavering key, the elevator's irrelevant ding to affirm a world with floors above. These are final images chosen for quiet longevity, meant less to stun than to echo after lights are off. You raise nothing and lower nothing. You subtract the urge to flourish, letting consequence sit unbothered. So stewardship, not spectacle, owns the beat. It is the kind of landing that holds, because the story kept the possibility of loss alive, and then chose recovery that looks like maintenance, which is the strangest, truest kind of wind down here. 517 stays a room. 518 stays a room. Your voice gives the password hello in the tone that never startles and receives, exactly as requested. Nothing new to carry. The tablet tucks your initials into a neat column that daylight will misread as housekeeping and memory will read as survival. The camera bubble at the elbow elects, again, not to blink. You elect again, not to perform. Ambiguity is allowed only where it comforts. Is the hour over? Yes. Will another come? Also yes. And between those honest answers, the corridor breathes like a choir declining a solo, so the harmony can remain intact. Another seal settles. Another minute takes its chair among the curated nothings. The gallery of negative miracles gains one more placard with simple captions. 517 remained. 518 remained. The hall remained. And the curation itself feels like a craft, a way of ending that does not close a fist, only teaches the hand to rest without dropping anything fragile. When you finally turn toward the desk, the keycard's soft, square prints its faint geometry through the pocket onto your skin. A signature you will recognize later as proof that authority did not have to be loud to be real. The elevator dings its upstairs roomer exactly once. The vents keep their key. The light refuses the mirror. The sentence finishes on time. You log the hour, the loop, the unremarkable mercy. Then let the screen go dim, so the corridor can own the silence without sharing it with glass. This is the ending the ward can afford, and the one it prefers. A door closing quietly, a hinge that knows its part, a breath that goes in and out and doesn't ask for applause. Behind you, nothing calls your name. Ahead of you, nothing hurries your feet. The corridor remains a corridor, which is to say a kept promise, and you remain the person-shaped wedge that kept it, which is to say a kept promise too. Between those two keepings, the night concludes not with a lesson, but with a practice, ready to be repeated when repetition is what saves. The night's last duty is to refuse spectacle and still be complete. The hinge finds the jamb and kisses it again. The vents keep their key. The glass keeps its decision not to mirror. And the corridor does the rare, brave thing of remaining a corridor, which is the smallest and most durable kind of ending, chosen rather than collapsed into, steady and kept. Information stays exact, rooms, times, initials, because garnish would be a theft from the quiet that was earned. Endings that land do not decorate so much as decide. A measured cadence that lets consequence sit without being arranged into fireworks. The period gentle enough not to bruise the page and firm enough not to float away. Your loop offers its last punctuation. 517, 518, desk, repeat, and the anchors show up on cue. A gasket's soft kiss, a duck's unwavering key, the elevator's irrelevant upstairs rumor. These are final images selected to echo, not stun, kind that follow after the reader has left the ward, and still find the ear when faucets hush and refrigerators hum. You do not raise, you do not drop, you maintain, because sometimes the bravest choice at the end is stewardship without flourish, a refusal of the easy death as full stop in favor of a practice that continues past the paragraph, an ending that is also an instruction to the next indicated small thing, and let it be enough. 517 remains a room. 518 remains a room. The password hello is said in the tone that never startles and receives, exactly as requested. Nothing new to carry. The tablet tucks your initials into a neat column that daylight will call housekeeping and memory will call survival. At the elbow, the camera bubble chooses not to blink. You choose not to perform. Ambiguity is allowed only where it comforts. Is it over? Yes. Will it be asked again? Yes. And between those honest answers, the corridor breathes like a choir guarding its harmony. By declining a solo in the final bar, another seal settles. Another minute takes its chair with the curated nothings. The gallery of negative miracles accepts one more placard with simple captions. 517 remained. 518 remained. The hall remained. And you accept that curation itself is the work. A hand taught to rest without dropping what it promised to hold. The keycard's soft, square prints its faint geometry against the skin through the pocket. A quiet signature that says choice was exercised and did not need to shout. The elevator grants one last upstairs ding. The vents keep their key. The light refuses the mirror. The sentence ends on time. Not to close the world, but to leave the hinge oiled for use. You log the hour, the loop, the unremarkable mercy. Then let the screen dim so the silence can belong to air and not to glass. This is how quiet horror sticks its landing, not with revelation, not with a body on the floor, but with a corridor that stayed itself while being asked not to, and a human shape that chose to keep it so. Behind you, nothing calls. Ahead of you, nothing hurries. Between those two dignities, the night concludes as a practice rather than a pose. Set down gently where another set of hands can find it. A promise kept in the smallest possible unit. One hallway, 1 hour, one breath that goes in, goes out, and does not ask for applause. Morning finds the corridor doing what it practiced all night, remaining itself. And that is the only triumph it permits. A hinge meeting a jam without apology. A hum holding pitch. A light refusing to mirror. The smallest ending chosen on purpose, and therefore the most kept. Endings that land decline garnish. The ledger wants rooms, times, initials, and nothing else. A measured cadence that places a period gentle enough not to bruise and firm enough not to float away, leaving silence for breath rather than for echo tricks. The loop signs off in its own punctuation. 517, 518, desk, repeat. And the anchors present their final images without asking for attention. the gasket's soft kiss, the duct's unwavering key, the elevator's irrelevant rumor of upstairs, echoes chosen to persist after faucets hush and refrigerators hum. No rising, no dropping maintenance as courage, because the bravest choice sometimes is stewardship without flourish, an ending that is also instruction. Do the next indicated small thing, and let that be enough again and again. 517 remains a room. 518 remains a room. The password hello goes out in the tone that never startles and returns with exactly what was requested. Nothing new to carry. And the tablet tucks initials into a neat column daylight will call housekeeping, and memory will call survival. At the elbow, the camera bubble still declines to blink. Performance still declines to arrive. Ambiguity is allowed only where it comforts. Is it over? Yes. Will it be asked again? Yes. The harmony protected by refusing a final solo. Another seal settles. Another minute takes its chair among curated nothings. The gallery of negative miracles gains one more placard with plain captions. 517 remained. 518 remained. The hall remained, and curation proves itself the work. A hand taught to rest without dropping what it promised to hold. The keycard's soft, square presses its faint geometry through cloth into skin, like a signature that doesn't ask to be read aloud. The elevator gives one last upstairs ding. The vents keep their key. The light refuses the mirror. The sentence ends on time, leaving the hinge oiled for use. You log the hour, the loop, the unremarkable mercy. Then let the screen dim, so the quiet belongs to air instead of glass. This is how quiet horror holds its shape. No revelation, no collapse. Only a corridor staying itself while being asked not to, and a person-shaped wedge choosing to keep it so. Behind, nothing calls. Ahead, nothing hurries. Between those dignities, the practice concludes where another pair of hands can find it. A promise kept in the smallest workable unit. One hallway, 1 hour, one breath that goes in, goes out, and does not ask for applause. Daylight does not argue with what the corridor has chosen to be. It touches paint, checks the hum, nods at the hinge that meets the jam without waking sleepers, and leaves behind the same small bravery it found. A hallway remaining a hallway, an ending selected rather than stumbled into, quietly kept. No garnish is added, because denouements hold best when they validate what was done instead of explaining it. The ledger prefers rooms, times, initials, and a cadence that places its period gentle enough not to bruise, firm enough not to float, offering closure and possibility without a speech. The loop gives its last punctuation. 517, 518, desk, repeat. And the anchors provide final images that echo cleanly. A gasket's soft kiss, a duck's unwavering key, an elevator's upstairs rumor chosen for persistence over spectacle. They carry theme and mood past the paragraph's edge. Nothing rises, nothing drops. Stewardship is the shape of courage here. The practiced refusal to over-resolve, letting the end feel earned and proportionate. A calm after the storm that remembers the storm without resummoning it. 517 remains a room. 518 remains a room. The password hello goes out in the tone that never startles and returns with exactly what was requested. Nothing new to carry. The tablet tucks initials where daylight will call it housekeeping, and memory will recognize survival. At the elbow, the camera bubble still declines to blink. Performance still declines to arrive. Ambiguity is allowed only where it comforts. Is it over? Yes. Will the practice be needed again? Yes. And the harmony stays intact because the final bar refuses a solo. One more seal settles, one more minute takes its chair among curated nothings. The gallery of negative miracles accepts another placard. 517 remained. 518 remained. The hall remained. And the curation itself reads as character resolution. A hand taught to rest without dropping what it promised to hold. The keycard's soft square presses its faint geometry through cloth into skin, like a signature that never needs to be read aloud. The elevator gifts one last upstairs ding. The vents keep their key. The light refuses the mirror. The sentence ends on time, leaving the hinge oiled for use. You log the hour, the loop, the unremarkable mercy, and let the glass go dim, so the quiet belongs to air again. This is a denouement sized to the story's truth. No revelation, no collapse. Only a corridor staying itself while being asked not to, and a person-shaped wedge choosing to keep it so. Behind, nothing calls. Ahead, nothing hurries. Between those dignities, the practice sets itself down where other hands can find it. A promise kept in the smallest workable unit. One hallway, 1 hour, one breath that goes in, goes out, and does not ask for applause. Morning obliges the corridor without rearranging it. Paint accepts light. The hum holds pitch. The hinge meets the jam with its practiced kiss. And what remains is the smallest kind of triumph. Selected rather than stumbled into, quietly kept. No garnish arrives. Endings in this register validate. They don't explain, placing a period gentle enough not to bruise and firm enough not to drift, leaving air for breath instead of echo tricks, and letting meaning persist where it was earned. The loop signs off in its own punctuation. 517, 518, desk, repeat, and sets out its final images for echo rather than spectacle. A gasket's soft kiss, a duct's unwavering key, an elevator's upstairs rumor that will follow into kitchens and hallways after faucets hush. Nothing rises, nothing drops. Stewardship remains the chosen shape of courage, a refusal to over-resolve that lets the calm feel proportionate to what came before. The kind of denouement that remembers the storm without resummoning it. 517 stays a room. 518 stays a room. The password hello is offered in the tone that never startles and returns precisely what was requested. Nothing new to carry. The tablet tucks initials where daylight will misname them housekeeping, and memory will recognize survival. At the elbow, the camera bubble declines to blink. Performance declines to arrive. Ambiguity is permitted only where it comforts. Is it over? Yes. Will the practice be needed again? Yes. And the harmony holds because the final bar refuses a solo. One more seal settles, one more minute takes its chair among curated nothings. The gallery of negative miracles accepts another placard with plain captions. 517 remained. 518 remained. The hall remained, and curation reads as character. A hand taught to rest without dropping what it promised to hold. The keycard's soft, square prints, its faint geometry through cloth into skin, like a signature that never asks to be read aloud. The elevator gives a last upstairs ding. The vents keep their key. The light refuses the mirror. The sentence ends on time and leaves the hinge oiled for use. The hour is logged, the loop, the unremarkable mercy. The glass goes dim, so quiet belongs to air again. This is how the form holds. No revelation, no collapse. Only a corridor staying itself while being asked not to. And a person-shaped wedge choosing to keep it so. Nothing calls from behind. Nothing hurries ahead. Between those dignities, the practice sets itself down where other hands can find it. A promise kept in the smallest workable unit. One hallway, 1 hour, one breath that goes in, goes out, and does not ask for applause. Morning obliges. Without rearranging paint accepts light. The hum holds pitch. The hinge meets the jam with its practiced kiss. And what remains is the smallest triumph, selected, not stumbled into, quietly kept. No garnish arrives. In this register, endings validate rather than explain. A period set gentle enough not to bruise and firm enough not to drift, leaving breath where echo would be a trick, letting meaning persist where it was earned. The loop signs off in its own punctuation. 517, 518, desk, repeat, and lays down final images for echo over spectacle. A gasket's soft kiss, a duck's unwavering key, the elevator's upstairs rumor that will follow into kitchens after faucets hush. Nothing rises, nothing drops. Stewardship remains the chosen shape of courage, a refusal to over-resolve that lets the calm feel proportionate to the storm. Remembering without resummoning it, 517 stays a room. 518 stays a room. The password hello goes out in the tone that never startles and returns precisely what was requested. Nothing new to carry. And the tablet tucks initials where daylight misnames it housekeeping, and memory recognizes survival. At the elbow, the camera bubble declines to blink. Performance declines to arrive. Ambiguity is permitted only where it comforts. Is it over? Yes. Will the practice be needed again? Yes, and the harmony holds because the final bar refuses a solo. One more seal settles, one more minute takes its chair among curated nothings. The gallery of negative miracles accepts another placard. 517 remained, 518 remained, the hall remained, and curation reads as character. A hand taught to rest without dropping what it promised to hold. The keycard's soft square prints, a faint geometry through cloth into skin, like a signature that never needs to be read aloud. The elevator grants a last upstairs ding. The vents keep their key. The light refuses the mirror. The sentence ends on time and leaves the hinge oiled for use. The hour is logged, the loop, the unremarkable mercy, and the glass goes dim so quiet belongs to air again. This is how quiet horror holds its shape. No revelation, no collapse, only a corridor staying itself while being asked not to, and a person-shaped wedge choosing to keep it so. Nothing calls from behind, nothing hurries ahead between those dignities. The practice sets itself down where other hands can find it. A promise kept in the smallest workable unit. One hallway, 1 hour, one breath that goes in, goes out, and does not ask for applause. Morning obliges. Without rearranging, paint accepts light. The hum holds pitch. The hinge meets the jam with its practiced kiss. And what remains is the smallest triumph, selected, not stumbled into, quietly kept. No garnish arrives. In this register, endings validate rather than explain. A period set gentle enough not to bruise and firm enough not to drift, making space for breath where echoes would be tricks, and letting meaning persist where it was earned. The loop signs off in its own punctuation. 517, 518, desk, repeat, and lays down final images for echo over spectacle. A gasket's soft kiss, a duct's unwavering key, an elevator's upstairs rumor that follows into kitchens after faucets hush. Nothing rises, nothing drops. Stewardship stays the chosen shape of courage, a refusal to over-resolve that lets the calm feel proportionate to the storm. A denouement that remembers without resummoning. 517 stays a room. 518 stays a room. The password hello is offered in the tone that never startles and returns precisely what was requested, nothing new to carry. And the tablet tucks initials where daylight misnames it housekeeping, and memory recognizes survival. At the elbow, the camera bubble declines to blink. Performance declines to arrive. Ambiguity is permitted only where it comforts. Is it over? Yes. Will the practice be needed again? Yes, and the harmony holds, because the final bar refuses a solo. One more seal settles, one more minute takes its chair among curated nothings. The gallery of negative miracles accepts another placard. 517 remained, 518 remained, the hall remained, and curation reads as character. A hand taught to rest without dropping what it promised to hold. The keycard's soft square prints, a faint geometry through cloth into skin, like a signature that never needs to be read aloud. The elevator grants a last upstairs ding. The vents keep their key. The light refuses the mirror. The sentence ends on time and leaves the hinge oiled for use. The hour is logged, the loop, the unremarkable mercy, and the glass goes dim, so quiet belongs to air again. This is how quiet horror holds its shape. No revelation, no collapse, only a corridor staying itself while being asked not to, and a person shaped, wedged choosing to keep it so. Nothing calls from behind, nothing hurries ahead. Between those dignities, the practice sets itself down where other hands can find it. A promise kept in the smallest workable unit. One hallway, 1 hour, one breath that goes in, goes out, and does not ask for applause. Morning obliges without rearranging, paint accepts light. The hum holds pitch. The hinge meets the jam with its practiced kiss. And what remains is the smallest triumph, selected, not stumbled into, quietly kept. No garnish arrives. The denouement validates instead of explains. A period set gentle enough not to bruise and firm enough not to drift, leaving breath where an echo would be a trick, and letting meaning live precisely where it was earned. The loop signs off in its own punctuation. 517, 518, desk, repeat, and lays down final images for echo over spectacle. A gasket's soft kiss, a duct's unwavering key, an elevator's upstairs rumor that follows into kitchens after faucets hush. Nothing rises, nothing drops. Stewardship stays the chosen shape of courage, a refusal to over-resolve that keeps the calm proportional to the storm. A quiet after that remembers, without resummoning. 517 remains a room. 518 remains a room. The password hello goes out in the tone that never startles and returns exactly what was requested. Nothing new to carry. And the tablet tucks initials where daylight misnames it housekeeping, and memory recognizes survival. At the elbow, the camera bubble declines to blink. Performance declines to arrive. Ambiguity is permitted only where it comforts. Is it over? Yes. Will the practice be needed again? Yes, and the harmony holds, because the final bar refuses a solo. One more seal settles, one more minute takes its chair among curated nothings. The gallery of negative miracles accepts another placard. 517 remained. 518 remained. The hall remained. And curation reads as character. A hand taught to rest without dropping what it promised to hold. The keycard's soft square prints, a faint geometry through cloth into skin, like a signature that never needs to be read aloud. The elevator grants a last upstairs ding. The vents keep their key. The light refuses the mirror. The sentence ends on time and leaves the hinge oiled for use. The hour is logged, the loop, the unremarkable mercy, and the glass goes dim, so the quiet belongs to air again. This is how quiet horror keeps its shape. No revelation, no collapse, only a corridor staying itself while being asked not to. and a person shaped, wedge choosing to keep it so. Nothing calls from behind, nothing hurries ahead. Between those dignities, the practice sets itself down where other hands can find it. A promise kept in the smallest workable unit. One hallway, 1 hour, one breath that goes in, goes out, and does not ask for applause. Morning obliges without rearranging, paint accepts light. The hum holds pitch. The hinge meets the jam with its practiced kiss. And what remains is the smallest kind of triumph, selected rather than stumbled into, quietly kept, no garnish arrives. In quiet horror, the denouement validates instead of explains. A period set gentle enough not to bruise and firm enough not to drift, leaving breath where echo would be a trick, and letting meaning persist where it was earned. The loop signs off in its own punctuation. 517, 518, desk, repeat, and lays down final images chosen for echo over spectacle. A gasket's soft kiss, a duck's unwavering key, an elevator's upstairs rumor that follows into kitchens after faucets hush. Nothing rises, nothing drops. Stewardship stays the chosen shape of courage, a refusal to over-resolve that keeps the calm proportional to the storm, remembering without resummoning what was already endured. 517 remains a room. 518 remains a room. The password hello goes out in the tone that never startles and returns exactly what was requested, nothing new to carry. And the tablet tucks initials where daylight misnames it housekeeping, and memory recognizes survival. At the elbow, the camera bubble declines to blink. Performance declines to arrive. Ambiguity is permitted only where it comforts. Is it over? Yes. Will the practice be needed again? Yes, and the harmony holds, because the final bar refuses a solo. One more seal settles, one more minute takes its chair among curated nothings. The gallery of negative miracles accepts another placard. 517 remained, 518 remained, the hall remained, and curation reads as character. A hand taught to rest without dropping what it promised to hold. The keycard's soft square prints, a faint geometry through cloth into skin, like a signature that never asks to be read aloud. The elevator grants a last upstairs ding. The vents keep their key. The light refuses the mirror. The sentence ends on time and leaves the hinge oiled for use. The hour is logged, the loop, the unremarkable mercy, and the glass goes dim, so the quiet belongs to air again. This is how the form holds. No revelation, no collapse, only a corridor staying itself while being asked not to, and a person-shaped wedge choosing to keep it so. Nothing calls from behind, nothing hurries ahead. Between those dignities, the practice sets itself down where other hands can find it. A promise kept in the smallest workable unit. One hallway, 1 hour, one breath that goes in, goes out, and does not ask for applause. One breath that goes in, goes out, and does not ask for applause.